Before we begin the formal ceremonies, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the land, the Darrick people of the Eora Nation. I'd also like to pay my respects to our elders that have walked before us, walk with us today, and our future elders. And when I was thinking about this today, I was about our elders. I believe, our elders in our Aboriginal communities are identified because of their wisdom and their work within the communities and their leadership, which I believe really, that's Patrick. Patrick has given us some lead and his wisdom, and I thank him for that. So I believe that Patrick is an elder within our community, our LHD community, and I think this is a really great thing to have Patrick's name to this building, and well deserved for his commitment and dedication. And better than that, Patrick, you know our financial situation. Well, we've worked out a reduced fee for the advertisement. Okay for that. So, yeah, mate, I just wish you all the best in your retirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clark. And as I've said, a very warm welcome to everyone here today, and to those that are actually joining us via live streaming in all parts of the world. I think we have people that are watching us live in the US as this goes out. So I want to acknowledge particularly members of the Nepean Blue Mountains Local Health District Board that are here with us. And we have two special guests as ex-Directors General of New South Wales Health, Robin Cruck and Mick Reid, both here with us today. But of course, first and foremost, to recognise Patrick and Suzanne, and to acknowledge members of their family here with us today. Rebecca, James and Sophie, Edward and Marissa, Thomas, Isabel and Russell, Charlotte and Louisa. They're a very impressive Cregan family turnout. Patrick, we know that you are very fond of Hawaii, and so we thought we'd take inspiration from things that were near and dear to you today. And if you listen and read about Hawaiian history and some of the traditions, the lei is given as a token of affection, and there can be no greater affection than there is in this room today for you. And so I just want to ask Elizabeth to come forward. So as well as people that are here today, we've had many messages from people who couldn't be with us today, who've all sent their very best wishes and their deep regrets that they couldn't be here today. And amongst those, the Honourable Gillian Skinner, the New South Wales Minister for Health, Elizabeth Coff, Secretary of the New South Wales Ministry for Health, the Honourable Stuart Ayres, Member for Penrith, Tanya Davies, Member for Mulgoa, and Martin Bowles, the current the current Secretary of the Commonwealth Department of Health, who used to work here also some years ago. So in history, there are many partnerships that are well known. And if you think of music, you might think of Rodgers and Hammerstein. You might think of Lennon and McCartney or Simon and Garfunkel. Comedy, you might think of Abbott and Costello. And if you think about the movies, You might think about Batman and Robin, or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I'm not quite sure which category the duo that I'm about to introduce fit into, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Peter Flynn, who's the Executive Medical Director at Nepean Hospital, and Professor Mohammed Kadra, who's our Head of Urology here. So please join me. Dynamic duo.
Who's on first?
Abbott's on first. Costello comes later. There are many facets we know of Patrick. We know of his surgical skill and we know of his leadership. But do you know he was a great builder? In 1977, my wife and I were seconded out here to go to ED, and this was the building we went to. It was built in 1956, and it was the original building on the area that we presently have the buildings on. And it was bought, the area, the land, a block of land called Jones Estate was bought by the local citizens. Ever since Patrick came here in 1983, he's been trying to knock it down. And he succeeded. This is the last remnant, which is the old nurses' home. Once my wife and I went back to Concord. My wife went to the Mater and worked with Susie, and Patrick came to Concord in 1987. In our discussions every night, Susie, I noticed there was a term used at the Mater which wasn't frequently used at Concord, and that was gin and tonic. Patrick, once he came to Concord, revamped the surgical training scheme, for which I am grateful. And in 1983, he came out to Nepean. A year or so later, I went north to study thoracic surgery and learn how to bend bananas. But I found out that that's an inherited trait which doesn't penetrate past the southern border of Queensland. When I came in 1988, Patrick rang me and asked would I start a thoracic service out here, for which obviously I was delighted, and it was an opportunity to develop the service as I saw fit. But when I came back, it wasn't the same hospital, and although this is an overhead graphic, you can see that there is now a wing, which was North Block, which was opened in 1983 when Patrick came, and it incorporated the 4 wards, the new theatres and the intensive care. The hospital developed and there was quite an amount of turbulence. There was doctors' disputes and fights with the CEO, but the big break for Nepean Hospital came with Peter Collins when he announced in 1989, 1990, that type of time, that Nepean Hospital would be a teaching hospital and he would give $100 million to develop the hospital. Patrick, of course, was in the forefront of this, and you can see the groundwork there for West Block, which was opened in 1993. And this is the photo of West Block. You can see the 5-storey buildings with the ED on the far end. It really was a remarkable building. It was most notable. It was kind of the tallest building in Penrith. We still don't know why it was bent. I think it was probably a Queensland architect. The next development, for once again, which Patrick was greatly involved, sorry, I've got my orientation wrong. Go there. Was 1995. If I put the arrow on it, that's the new theatre block. We had 4 theatres and we got 4 more, and that made us up to 8 theatres. The next development, for which Patrick was on the board for more so because Brian Sparrett did a lot of the footwork, and that was South Block, and that opened in 2000. The one I missed out was this one, which wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Patrick, and that's cancer care. In 2004, you can see that the ED has gone up 2 levels or 3 levels, up to the same level as the other buildings, and that was a new a cardiac cath lab. But down below, and the main reason for this renovation in 2004 was that our ED was just not big enough. And as you probably know, it's still not big enough. The next development was the North Block renovation. Sorry, I'll go back here, which is over here, and that was in 2009. And then, of course, we have East Block, which we're today naming the Patrick Cregan wing, which started in 2008. The history of that I know intimately. So Patrick set up the mantra, we need 60 beds, 6 new theatres and 6 new ICU beds, or was it 12? I'm not quite sure. But that was the call which got all the medical staff together, and we went and actually, Robin would probably remember because you were probably on the other side. And we were given $80 million, which was subsequently taken away by Nathan Reeves. And then the global financial crisis came, and the federal government wanted to spend money. And here we are. We had a plan which was all ready, and that's how we got East Block and also the new mental health facility. So that was started in 2008, and it was opened in 2012. And finally, we've got the car park, which had been long promised, and a complaint from many patients that we had no parking, and that was opened in 2012. So you can see there's a constant stream of building from the moment Patrick arrived here, but it hasn't finished. As you might have noticed in the recent election, that we've got another campaign for our next building, and the person who spearheaded that was Patrick. Thank you, Patrick.
What interests me is how great men are formed and how great men become so. There are a couple of theories in the late Victorian era which really considered this. Thomas Carlyle, who was a sociologist and philosopher, said that the history of the world is made up by the biographies of great men. The contrary view, which is often promulgated and perhaps more recently popular, is that events form great men. When Patrick came here in 1983, I think one of the fundamental things to recognise is that this was not a popular hospital to come and spend your working life. And over that period of time, we have risen to now, in several of the registrar training programs, we are the #1 pick in Australia. And I can honestly say that about urology, and I know anaesthetics and other places we are. And so the issue is, for Patrick and for Peter and several of the people that came to this hospital in the 80s and early 90s, is that they realised that a life in Western Sydney, that illness in Western Sydney was as valuable as illness in Camperdown or Darlinghurst, and that the good that they did for the community and their belief in that was something that was the event and also the predisposing cause for their greatness. It is interesting that, wrapped with illness and with the challenges that Patrick has had recently, that is, as recently as a couple of months ago, he was still giving interviews with the Sydney Morning Herald on behalf of this place, telling the New South Wales government to address the funding differential between East and West, between Camperdown and between Penrith, and to augment and build the next generation of buildings that we need here in order to provide the care for the people of Western Sydney. Patrick, as you know, I'm head of surgery at Sydney Uni, and there is a policy, by the way, about naming buildings. So I thought it would be best to go through and see if you fit the bill for this building. The first thing is that we must only use the names of admirable people. Well, greatness is not measured by what a man or woman accomplishes, but by the opposition he had in accomplishing it. And you certainly had your fair share of opposition in government, and yet created so much, as Peter has shown. It says we should recognise individual contributions. Well, Peter has talked about the building. I'd like to talk about telehealth. I'd like to talk about your world-beating telerobotic telesurgery experiments in the 90s, when nobody had ever heard of virtual health. You created here the virtual intensive care unit, which is still the model for the telehealth success that we've had. So I think you fit that bill. Ensure a gift that's given for the building is large enough to justify the recognition by name. Well, we thought you've given your entire working life, mate, and that's good enough for us. Avoid changing the name already on a building. The example is, of course, the ANZ Stadium, which used to be the Telstra Stadium, which used to be the Sydney Olympic Stadium, so we didn't want that. But Kay Hyman, you'll be pleased to know if there is an act of God or natural disaster, we are allowed to rename the building at some stage in the future. But now, avoid naming things for retired or departed administrators. The other name that was bandied was the Stephen Boyages building. And the final thing is be prepared for controversy over the naming choices. Well, there is no controversy in the entire local hospital district, and certainly in New South Wales Health. So, Patrick, this is obviously this whole community's way of saying thank you, of saying we shall not forget. I want to leave you with the words of Tennyson, who, despite the fact that you are not with us, we are still that force which in previous times did move heaven and earth. But what we are one equal measure of heroic heart, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, Patrick, and we shall strive to seek, to find, and never to yield.
So thank you, Peter, and thank you, Mohammed. So if I can just ask you now to turn your attention to the screen, and we just have a short video that provides messages from some of the people that couldn't be with us today.
When we look at East Block, we can see a progression over the years from West Block to South Block to East Block, and Patrick played a major role in East Block coming to fruition, to East Block being what it is today.
He's tenacious and tireless and doesn't take no for an answer. But a lot of it is just a lot of constant work and having a target, having the aim, and single-minded and determined that this is important and following it through.
And I'm sure you've heard from others about stunts such as Bob's bed, which was half a bed, deliberately cut to that size to give an indication of how Nepean was funded to the central city hospitals. It was very successful, and a lot of that imagination, in fact, came from Pat. And it's without question, I have to say that he played a pivotal role in the development of Nepean.
This is just in honour of you. It's all in honour of all of the hard work he's done for the 30 years and all the people that he's taught, trained and mentored during that time. So thanks for all the hard work.
I just want to say, Pat, thank you, and it's really been a great journey.
Hi Patrick, I just want to congratulate you on the naming of the East Block building. And not just this building, really, most of the buildings in the new part of the hospital has been your work and tireless effort that many of us probably don't even know. We just take it for granted. Just want to thank you for all your years of support and mentoring, and you're a great inspiration to all of us, and we'll continue to carry on fighting for Nepean.
Speaking on behalf of Patrick and the Cregan family, can I now invite James Cregan to to the lectern, please.
Thank you, everyone. On behalf of Dad, my mum Susie, my brothers and sisters, and our extended family, I'd like to thank you all for your time and support today. We're all extremely proud of the honour that you have extended, Dad. Dad, or Cranky, as many of you know him, has always been a tremendously passionate advocate for the healthcare funding of Western Sydney. His passion also for all things high-tech knows no bounds. I'm sure you can all see how much of that passion he brings to his work. I know I've lost count of the number of times he's tried to explain robotics and remote care to me. Until a few years ago, we had the sawn-off bed, the patient bed that he'd used to indicate the funding disparity between East and West in our shed as a reminder. Unfortunately, Mum has since thrown out the old suit jacket with a hole in the elbow that he used to deliberately wear to meetings about funding. Pat will tell you that he generally prefers a direct approach. And as proud as we are of Dad, we know that he's part of a team of similarly passionate people. I'd particularly like us to thank his friends and colleagues on his behalf, and to the people he's operated with, shared tea rooms and clinical rooms with, sat on committees with, argued with, and shared great and small challenges and victories with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. So with naming a building, obviously, comes some official plaque here that Susie, would you like to come forward and with Patrick if you wish? And you just want to open the So again, if I could ask you just to express your thanks and congratulations with a round of applause. So you've heard from Peter and from Mohammed about significant investment of Patrick's passion and time and the results that ensued with buildings and development of clinical services and great teaching programs and so many, many things. But as the Chief Executive who's been here since 2011, which was at the time of the last round of reforms, and I've no doubt there'll be another round of reforms at some time in the future, but that signalled the establishment of local health districts and Patrick's appointment as the chair of the board. So I just want to acknowledge his great contribution in that regard as well. As a new Chief Executive who was fumbling around and trying to find her feet, there was no greater person to have as a chair than Patrick. And 7 o'clock on Friday mornings will always hold a special place for me because that's the time that we would meet. Sometimes it was very brief, and sometimes it was a bit longer as we mulled over the challenges ahead. But those are certainly very special times for me and a time that will always have a special place in my heart. And I know that I speak on behalf of all my executive team and the staff particularly that have worked with Patrick in the new organisation since 2011, all of whom thank him for his wisdom, his wit, his dry sense of humour, and just being such a fantastic person to work with. Thank you. Cregan family and other very welcome guests this afternoon, that brings us to the end of the formal part of this afternoon. We obviously have something to eat and something to drink outside, and I invite you to join us in sharing something to eat and drink. And for those of you that may not have entered through the old East Block entrance, if you make your way back out now the Patrick Cregan building, you will see the name on the glass, and you will see the plaque inside, and a photo of Patrick and a bit of a description about his contribution, and the plaque that is here will join that later. So please, if you can, exit that way and take an opportunity just to think and to reflect. So I thank everyone for their attendance this afternoon. Thank you all, members of the Cregan family. It is such a very special opportunity for us to be able to say thank you in such a way as to be able to name the Patrick Cregan building, and we are just so delighted to have had you here and to be able to do this. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.